on your call with President Putin today, you'd mentioned that the Pope would like to take a role potentially in mediating these talks. Does that mean that the U.S. is taking a step back from...
No. I think it would be great to have it at the Vatican. Maybe it would have some extra significance.
Attention. Today, in the center of world politics, a phone call took place that could change the balance of power on the global stage. The leaders of two superpowers, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, held a rare and, according to insiders, very tense telephone conversation that caused a real storm in diplomatic circles. What did they talk about? What secret agreements could have been reached? And why is this causing alarm even among the most confident analysts?
About what?
About Ukraine.
Of course I did. I talked to him about it. I said, when are we going to end this, Vladimir? I've known him for a long time now.
Sources close to the talks claim that the conversation lasted more than an hour and included discussions not only on traditional topics such as arms control and economic sanctions, but also on new and unexpected issues that have experts talking about a possible shift in global politics. According to some reports, proposals were made for joint action in the field of cybersecurity, which could radically change the balance of power in the digital space. There was also discussion of hotspots from Ukraine to Syria, where tensions remain high. According to those present, the leaders did not simply exchange pleasantries, but engaged in a heated discussion, each trying to assert their position. Experts note that for the first time in a long time, frank warnings and ultimatums were issued that could have serious consequences.
And I saw that it was discussed yesterday, so I thought, and people told me that they'd be honored to do it. I would imagine they would be. So, no, I think it would be maybe helpful. There's tremendous bitterness, anger, and I think maybe that could help some of that anger. So having it at the Vatican would be, in Rome, would be I think it would be a great idea. Thank you.
But that's not all. Rumors are already circulating in the corridors of international politics that behind this conversation lies not only diplomacy, but also a struggle for influence in key regions, as well as the internal political games of each of the leaders. What did the official statements leave out? What details remain hidden behind the closed doors of the Kremlin and the White House? Today, we will delve into the latest data, analyze possible scenarios for the development of events, and explain why this phone call could be the beginning of a new chapter in relations between Russia and the US. This is not just a conversation, it is a signal to the whole world. Stay tuned. The most important part is yet to come.
I said, when are we going to end this bloodshed, this bloodbath? It's a bloodbath. And I do believe he wants to end it. You know, when I made the call, I told the people last night, I spoke to the heads of the different countries, Germany and Finland, we had Italy, as you know, and UK was on the line today, and a couple of others, and then they were in turn calling everyone. Ursula was there from the European Union. She was terrific.
The recent phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin caused a stir in international circles as the two leaders discussed several important, and in some cases, unexpected topics. The conversation was based on an attempt to establish dialogue on key issues that have long been a stumbling block in relations between the United States and Russia. Sources close to the administrations of both countries report that the conversation lasted about an hour and a half and was filled with complex and at times emotional moments. The main topics of discussion were the situation in Ukraine, arms control issues, and prospects for cooperation in the field of cybersecurity. In addition, the leaders touched upon economic sanctions and possible joint action in the fight against international terrorism.
And we spoke for a long time about it, and they got a problem. It's a big, big problem. It's a terrible war. It's very hard to extradite themselves away from what's taken place over there. The amount of anger, the amount of hate, and the amount of death. It's very hard, very tough situation. But I said to him, we got to get going.
Particular attention was paid to the escalating situation in eastern Ukraine, where military activity has been on the rise in recent months. According to insiders, Putin insisted that Moscow is interested in a peaceful resolution to the conflict, but set a condition that guarantees of non-interference by NATO and the US in the region. Trump, in turn, expressed his willingness to engage in dialogue, but stressed the need for full respect for Ukraine's sovereignty. This exchange of positions was not just a diplomatic formality. The conversation was accompanied by palpable tension, reflecting the depth of the differences that have accumulated in recent years. Unofficial sources indicate that harsh warnings were issued by both sides during the conversation, and there was a hint of the possibility of new restrictive measures if the situation does not begin to improve. In addition, the issue of strategic arms control was at the center of attention. Following the US withdrawal from the Open Skies Treaty and the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, both sides expressed concern about the risk of a new arms race. Putin proposed that Trump return to discussions on a new agreement that would take into account modern technological realities and expand the list of controlled weapons, including new types of hypersonic weapons. Trump, who has repeatedly expressed skepticism about international treaties, said this time that he was willing to consider the proposal on condition that Russia be completely transparent about its military programs. This conciliatory tone has given experts some hope for the first time in a long time, but many remain cautious given the long history of mutual suspicion and accusations.
And I did say also, if I thought that you couldn't do it, I'd step away, because what are you going to do? We don't have boots on the ground. We wouldn't have boots on the ground. But we do have a big stake, and the financial amount that was put up is just crazy. It's crazy. This isn't for us. This is for somebody else. The amount of money that we put up is record-setting. There's never been anything like this, and that includes weapons. Never been anything like this. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, on the medal, how far back do you intend to look to consider for the recipients? And then on your call today, if Putin ultimately proves to be the obstacle to peace, is further arming Ukraine on the table at that point?
Well, we'll look. I mean, we're going to look. I hope that, I like to think positively, frankly. I just can't believe that they allow this to continue. This would have never happened if I were president, and most people admit that. It would have, and it didn't happen for 4 years. And October 7th would have never happened either. That's the...
Cybersecurity was a separate topic of discussion. Sources close to the negotiators said that Putin had put forward an initiative to create a joint Russian-American center for information sharing and countering cyber attacks. According to participants, this proposal was met with cautious optimism, but without any specific commitments. Behind the scenes, it is said that such a step could be a breakthrough if the parties can overcome mutual distrust and agree on the rules of the game in cyberspace. In addition, the regulation of the use of artificial intelligence for military purposes was discussed, which was also a new topic in this format of dialogue. The second point of the plan is closely linked to how this phone call fits into the broader historical context of US-Russia relations, as well as the particular nature of the personal interaction between the two leaders. The relations between the two countries over the past decade have been cyclical, with periods of tension followed by attempts at cooperation. Meetings and phone calls between Trump and Putin have always attracted increased attention, given the unusual style of communication and political ambitions of both leaders. Historically, these contacts have been accompanied by both positive surprises and scandals and mutual accusations.
Attack on Israel, that would have never happened. So sad, a lot of things wouldn't have happened, but so sad to see it. No, I think that there's a good chance we can get this done. I believe Putin wants to do it. Now, if I thought Putin didn't want, I mean, that's what I do. My whole life is like deals, one big deal. And if I thought that President Putin did not want to get this over with, I wouldn't even be talking about it, because I'd just pull out.
What did you hear that gave you confidence that he does want peace versus buying time?
I think he's had enough. I think he's had enough. This has been a long time. This has been going on for more than 3 years.
Since becoming president, Trump has tried to build a unique model of dialogue with Russia, often drawing criticism both at home and abroad. He has repeatedly expressed his desire to establish great relations with Putin, believing that this would benefit both countries and the world as a whole. Putin, for his part, has behaved more cautiously, seeking to use such contacts to strengthen Russia's position and weaken Western sanctions. Over the past 3 years, the leaders have had several telephone conversations on a range of topics, from Syria to election interference, but but none have been as extensive and multifaceted as this latest one. The context of international events is also an important factor, significantly complicating relations. Increased sanctions pressure from the US, accusations of cyber attacks and election interference, and as well as conflicts in Ukraine and other regions have created a backdrop of mistrust and confrontation. Nevertheless, this phone call was a sign that, despite all the difficulties, the leaders are trying to find common ground. Some experts note that this conversation is part of a broader strategy by both countries to ease tensions ahead of important international summits and elections. It is noteworthy that in diplomatic circles, this phone call is being discussed as the possible start of a new wave of negotiations that could lead to a partial de-escalation of the situation. At the same time, however, there is a view that such contacts are being used by both leaders to strengthen their own political image, demonstrating to voters and the international community their ability to engage in dialogue and reach compromises. Analysts emphasize that for Putin, this is a way to show Russia's strength and willingness to cooperate, while for Trump, it is an opportunity to highlight his role as a peacemaker and influential player on the world stage.
When you think, right, it's been going on for a long time. Yeah, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. When you implored him to stop previously, Vladimir stopped on social media, and he didn't, he just continued. I'm curious, did you bring that up with him in your phone call today?
You have to talk about.
Sorry, you previously on Truth Social implored President Putin to stop. You wrote Vladimir stop, and he didn't stop, quite the contrary. I'm curious, did you bring that up on your call with him today?
No, I didn't bring that up, but I did say it's time, you got to stop this thing. And I believe he wants to stop. Look, I would be, I think, very able to tell whether or not he wanted to or what. I thought there was a very good chance, like a 50-50 chance, that he would say, I want to take the whole thing. I didn't know what he was going to say. And then they have a different kind of a problem.
Thus, this telephone conversation becomes another important milestone in the complex and multifaceted relations between the two countries, reflecting both real attempts to establish communication and deep-rooted contradictions and interests. The history of US-Russia relations, as well as the unique characteristics of Trump and Putin's interaction, give this event special significance and compel the international community to closely monitor further developments. Now that the content and historical context of the conversation between Trump and Putin have become known, analysis of the political and economic consequences that may follow from this dialogue is beginning. Although the official statements of both sides were neutral, experts are already actively discussing possible changes in international relations. On the one hand, the potential for lifting some sanctions seems real, especially with regard to economic restrictions that are already seriously affecting Russian businesses and financial institutions. Some insiders report that during the conversation, there were hints about setting up special working groups to develop plans for partially easing sanctions, taking into account the new political realities. At the same time, the economic consequences for the US and its allies could also be significant. Economists predict that any concessions on sanctions could cause internal divisions in the US Congress, as well as among European partners, many of whom are extremely wary of Russian influence. Rumors are already circulating in American political circles that some influential congressmen are considering additional restrictions in response to the recent phone call, believing that Trump is making too many compromises. This situation creates a tense balance between the desire to maintain allied solidarity and the need to find common ground with Russia. As for the military sphere, the conversation also reflected the potential for policy changes in the area of arms control. As already mentioned, the discussion of a return to the negotiating table on strategic arms was one of the key points. But in addition to this, there were unconfirmed reports of secret agreements related to restrictions on testing new types of hypersonic weapons and joint monitoring of military activity in the Arctic. According to unconfirmed reports, the leaders agreed to exchange satellite information to prevent incidents and accidental collisions, which is a novelty in traditional bilateral relations. If confirmed, this could be a serious step towards stabilizing the situation and reducing the risk of conflict escalation in a strategically important region.
But I believe he wants to stop. Be sure.
just now about backing away or walking away if it looks like it's going to be an intractable problem. Do you have a red line in your head of what would cause you to back away? And
Yeah, in my head, but not something I'm going to announce. But yeah, definitely in my head I do.
What
Yeah.
exactly would that look
Because
like?
this isn't our war. This is not my war. This is not the war. I mean, we got ourselves entangled in something that we shouldn't have been involved in. And we would have been a lot better off, and maybe the whole thing would have been better off, because it can't be much worse. It's a real mess. It's a death trap. So I think that, yeah, I would say I do have a certain line.
The international community's reaction to the phone call has been mixed, demonstrating the complexity of the current geopolitical situation. Many of the US's allies have expressed concern and even criticism of President Trump. European leaders, in particular the German Chancellor and the French President, have called for caution and demanded more transparent actions from Washington and Moscow. Public statements have included remarks that dialogue is important, but it must be backed up by concrete actions. Against this backdrop, discussions began in Brussels on a possible review of defense and economic strategies, which only underscores the tension of the situation. At the same time, some countries that traditionally support Russia viewed the call with optimism. In particular, China, although not directly involved in the talks, expressed support for the idea of dialogue and cooperation between the US and Russia, and considering it an important step towards strengthening global stability. Beijing stressed that any initiatives to reduce tensions in international relations are in the interests of the entire international community. In this regard, analysts note that the conversation between Trump and Putin could be a signal for other regional players such as India, Turkey, and the countries of the Middle East to review their own strategies and positioning in the geopolitical game. International experts and political analysts have actively joined the discussion on the possible consequences. Some believe that the phone call is only a first cautious attempt to restore at least a minimum level of trust between the two countries, which has been undermined in recent years. Others warn that the words may be followed by only a temporary lull, and that no real changes should be expected, given the depth and scale of the contradictions. Some even suggest that such negotiations are being used by both sides as a tool of domestic politics to strengthen their image among the electorate and demonstrate international influence. The international community and analysts are particularly interested in the internal motives and goals behind this phone call on both sides. For Vladimir Putin, this dialogue is an opportunity to show the world that Russia remains an influential player on the international stage and is ready for dialogue despite sanctions and criticism from the West. Within the country, this is perceived as a show of strength and independence, which strengthens the president's position among the conservative part of society and the security forces. Unofficial sources claim that it was important for Putin to gain recognition from the US and obtain security guarantees, especially in regions that he considers to be his zone of strategic influence. On the other hand, for Donald Trump, this conversation was part of a complex political game aimed at improving his own ratings and demonstrating his ability to negotiate with world leaders. Amid domestic political instability and criticism from the opposition, the president is eager to show that he is capable of diffusing international tensions and finding compromises that are beneficial to the US. However, according to some reports, there are a significant number of skeptics in the US administration who fear that such diplomacy could lead to unpredictable consequences and weaken America's position. Finally, the socio-political component remains important. For the populations of both countries, such discussions are important not only from the point of view of international politics, but also in the context of prospects for peace and stability. It is hoped that further dialogue will reduce tensions, ease fears of war and conflict, and improve the atmosphere in international relations. However, achieving these goals will require time, consistent action, and mutual respect. Thus, the results and forecasts following the recent telephone conversation between Trump and Putin demonstrate the complexity and multifaceted nature of the modern world, where dialogue, despite numerous obstacles, remains a key element. It remains to be seen how real actions will match words and how successful the two leaders' attempt to change the course of history will be. Time will tell whether this call will mark the beginning of a new era of cooperation or just another episode in the long and complicated history of relations between Russia and the US?